morning friends. In this video I am going to explain about the medical management of COVID-19. So in the previous video we have seen about the introduction, about the structure of virus, mode of transmission. Then we have seen the pathophysiology, clinical manifestations, and in the second part of the video we have seen the various diagnostic investigations. And this is the third part. In this I would like to discuss about medical management of COVID-19. So before going into the management aspects, I would like to classify the patients. So we know that when the patient comes to us, there are different types of persons, that is suspect case, probable case and confirmed case. Suspect case means the person is not confirmed as COVID positive, but he has exposed to COVID patients. That means he had physical contact with patients, or he has taken care of a COVID-19 patient, or he has traveled in a train or flight or bus in which COVID-19 patient has traveled. These are the different conditions in which we can declare a person as a suspect case. Suspect case, you may be knowing, suspect case will be quarantined and their specimen will be collected for examination. So once the test is positive, they will be declared as confirmed case of COVID-19 and they will be entering into another management pathway, that is called COVID care pathway. So those who are confirmed as COVID-19, they will enter into COVID-19, that is COVID care pathway. Then one more classification I told, that is probable case. Probable case means a suspect case with the investigation in result in pending, that is in the result is inconclusive or result is not available. So such cases are called probable case. So that is about the three types of persons, that is suspect case, probable case and confirmed case. So when the patient comes to the emergency department, what we have to do? There are different types of clinical syndrome, that is sometimes the patient may be asymptomatic, sometimes patient may be symptomatic with a varying level of illness, that is mild illness, moderate illness, severe illness, sepsis, septic shock, and patient presenting with different types of complications. So mild illness means that the patient may be having features of mild upper respiratory tract infections like fever, cough, nasal congestion, headache, myalgia, etc. Moderate illness means the patient will be having all these symptoms, plus there will be increased breath rate and decreased oxygen saturation, that is more than 24 per minute breath rate and less than 96% of oxygen saturation. Then severe cases means patient will be having labored breathing, fast breathing, low SpO2, cyanosis, severe cough, etc. Then patient with sepsis and septic shock, they will be having features of sepsis, that is high fever, high WBC count. The patient will be having hypotension, tachycardia, cold and clammy extremities, features of shock, etc. Then if the patient is having complications, the patient will be having the manifestations of complications. Complications in the previous video I have already explained it, that is there will be different types of complications, that is pulmonary complications will be there, thrombosis related complications will be there, ICU related complications will be there, then multi-organ dysfunction syndrome, that means different vital organ dysfunction will be there. So based on the complication, the clinical features will be there. So when we deal with the patient with mild manifestations or mild case, then what we have to do is we have to collect a detailed clinical history, that means the history of source of infection, history of primary contacts, history of secondary contacts, that we have to collect. Then we have to analyze the patient's symptom analysis, that is onset of symptom, duration, frequency, intensity, associated symptoms, etc. Then after that we will be doing symptomatic management in case of mild cases. So symptomatic management means antibiotic for fever, like that. So in this we have to think we have to monitor the patient in order to find out whether the patient's condition is worsening rapidly. So we have seen that many patients from the asymptomatic, they may rapidly deteriorate their condition and they may progress into different complications. So worsening of symptoms must be monitored. Then hydrochloroquine can be given except in the case of cardiac patients. So these are the management measures of mild cases that I can repeat. That is, clinical history must be taken, vital signs must be taken, antibiotics must be given, symptomatic management must be done, and then worsening of the symptoms must be monitored, and hydrochloroquine. This is the management measures. So this management measures I am explaining based on the Government of India and Government of Kerala clinical management guidelines. So next we will go on to moderate cases. Moderate cases means there will be the respiratory rate will be more than 24 and the saturation will be less than 94. Here also the same thing, that is clinical history must be taken, vital signs must be checked, that is BP, pulse, temperature, respiration, etc. Then lab investigations are very, very important, that is the WBC must be checked, then LFT, RFT, etc. is very, very important, that must be done daily. Then other investigations like chest X-ray and ECG must be done every 3 days. Then some specific investigations, that is CRP, CPK, serum creatinine, serum D-dimer, these troponin, these must be checked every 3 days and every 72 hourly. So this is about the diagnostic investigation. And here also in moderate cases we can manage with the symptomatic management, that is antibiotics, etc. can be given. Then based on the SpO2, oxygen administration can be given. That's oxygen administration means we can start with the standard oxygen therapy, that is oxygen administration with a simple O2 mask, and otherwise we can use simple O2 mask with the non-rebreathing bag or this reservoir bag. We can with reservoir bag, it will give more oxygen than a simple O2 mask. So one option is simple O2 mask or nasal bronchs. Another option is O2 mask with non-rebreathing mask. So this is the oxygen therapy, and we must monitor the patient. We must assess for any worsening of the symptom. And then that is about the oxygen administration. Then about the pharmacological management, that is remdesivir can be administered. Remdesivir must be given. Then anticoagulants must be given. The dosages I will explain later. And then steroids can be given, and hydrochloroquine can be given. So this is the pharmacological management of moderate cases, that is remdesivir. Its dosage is 100 mg, 200 mg initially, and then next 2 days 100 mg. That is remdesivir dosage. The action of the remdesivir is it will block the action of RNA-dependent RNA polymerase enzyme, which is an important enzyme involved in the replication of virus, that is development of many RNA from the single RNA. So that will be blocked by the action of remdesivir. Then the next drug is anticoagulants, that like enoxaparin, that is 1 mg per kg subcutaneously daily will be given. That is to prevent the thromboembolism complication. And next is the steroid, that is anti-inflammatory. For that we are giving methylprednisolone 1 mg per kg for 3 days, or this dexamethasone can be given, that 0.1 mg per kg for 3 days. Then hydrochloroquine 400 mg BD for the first day, and then 200 mg BD for the next 5 days. So this is the pharmacological management of moderate cases. Next we will move on to the management of severe cases. In the management of severe cases, we will be we can see that the patient will be having labored breathing, fast breathing, cyanosis, low SpO2, high fever, etc. For that, what we have to do is we will be assessing the SpO2 and we will be administering oxygen. And in the oxygen, we can try with other measures of oxygen if the standard oxygen therapy is not working. That is, standard oxygen therapy means oxygen administration through nasal bronchs or simple O2 mask. So if it is not effective, we can opt for other options like that high flow nasal oxygen. High flow nasal oxygen means it is a special machine is attached from the O2 supply. The oxygen will coming through a machine and it will be reaching to the patient. This machine will be warming the oxygen, the machine will humidify the oxygen, and we can adjust the rate of oxygen flow, we can adjust the fraction of inspired oxygen. So these are the advantages. It is humidification, warming, and mixing of the oxygen with the room air. That is the advantage of high flow nasal oxygen. So this method of oxygen administration can be done. This is the oxygen is administered through a nasal cannula or O2 mask. So there is risk for aerosol generation. So for that we can apply N95 mask on over the patient's nostrils, over the nasal bronchs or over the O2 mask. So that is about the high flow nasal oxygen. If it is indicated, that means if it is indicated in case of mild or moderate worsening hypoxemia, non-worsening hypoxemia. With the hypoxemia is worsening, we will go for endotracheal intubation and mechanical ventilation. If there is mild or moderate non-worsening hypoxemia, we can try with high flow nasal oxygen. It is a special equipment through which the oxygen will be passed for humidification and warming and mixing with the room air, and this has an advantage of better ventilation and better gas exchange and better oxygenation. So that is in the severe form of COVID-19. And then as in the other cases, there will be fluid administration is important in the severe form of COVID. That is, fluid must be administered, but at the same time fluid overload should not occur. Fluid overload can result in pulmonary edema and it can worsen the patient's condition. So that should not occur. Then anticoagulants must be administered, then steroids must be administered. Then another drug is tocilizumab. It is very effective in controlling the cytokine storm, and it is very important to block the interleukin. So that is the action of tocilizumab that can be administered. So these are the different management measures in severe form of COVID-19. I can repeat, that is oxygen administration, that if it is required high flow nasal oxygen, then fluid administration, then anticoagulant administration, steroid administration, and tocilizumab. So in pneumonia we can use, that is FAST, FAST, fluid, anticoagulant, steroid, and tocilizumab. Then in the severe form of COVID-19, if the patient go into respiratory failure and ARDS, how it can be manifested? It can be manifested by the diffuse crackles, and in the X-ray we can see pulmonary infiltrates. So the patient is confirmed as having ARDS, respiratory failure and all. There will be increased work of breathing and there will be decreasing SpO2. So I have already explained in the previous video about how we will categorize the ARDS based on Horowitz index, that is PO2 divided by FiO2. By that we can calculate the Horowitz index, or the amount of oxygen exchanged, that is amount of oxygen inhaled and amount of oxygen exchanged between the alveolar and alveolar capillary membrane. So that is the Horowitz index that I told. In case of mild ARDS, the rate is 200 to 300 mm of Hg. Moderate ARDS means 100 to 200 mm of Hg. Severe ARDS means less than 100 mm of Hg. The normal value of this index is 500 mm of Hg. So based on that, we will be classifying the ARDS. Then in the ARDS also, we can try with the high flow nasal oxygen initially, or we can try with the non-invasive ventilation. In the case of non-invasive ventilation, we can start with a pressure support of 5 to 10 centimeters of water, PEEP 5 to 15 centimeters of water, tidal volume 5 to 7 ml per kg, and FiO2 0.5 to 1. Like that, we can start with the non-invasive ventilation, or we can try with the high flow nasal oxygen. These are the different options, but our target is to achieve a SpO2 more than 94%. So this can be tried in case of in the beginning of ARDS, but we must monitor the patient and we must see whether there is worsening of symptoms. So this type of oxygen administration can be done only in case of mild or moderate non-worsening hypoxemia. If the hypoxemia is worsening, we must go for endotracheal intubation and mechanical ventilation. Next, I am going to explain about the refractory hypoxemia or respiratory failure. If it is there is refractory hypoxemia, that is hypoxemia which is not able to manage with these types of oxygen administration. Then the patient will go into respiratory failure. Then what has to be done? Then the strategy is a rapid sequence ventilation. Rapid sequence ventilation means the person, we cannot do trial and error or intubation. The person who is intubating the patient must do it fast, and in the first insertion itself he should get the he should reach the bronchi, and he should be able to ventilate the patient. So that is called rapid sequence ventilation. There are 8 P's for rapid sequence ventilation. That is, we are planning for ventilation, we are preparing the equipments, we are positioning the patient, we are pre-medicating the patient, we are pre-oxygenating the patient, we are placing the tube in the patient, we are making sure that it's placement proof, making sure that the tube is in the correct position, and then post-intubation care. Like that, 6 P's are there. All this must be done fast. That is called a rapid sequence ventilation. So rapid sequence ventilation must be done, and then about the ventilator setting. So now the patient is intubated and ventilator has to be connected. So how we will set the ventilator? So in that I have formulated a mnemonic, that is TRIP, that is tidal volume, rate, inspiratory pressure, and P. TRIP. So in the tidal volume it should be 4 to 6 ml per kg, like that it must be set. That means a low tidal volume. Then rate must be increased. Respiratory rate set must be increased in order to exhale more amount of carbon dioxide. Then inspiratory pressure, that must be low, and P, it must be high. So TRIP, you can remember that tidal volume, this rate, and inspiratory pressure, and P. Tidal volume must be low, rate must be high, inspiratory pressure must be low, and P must be high. Like that you can remember it. So the ventilator setting must be like that. So now the patient is intubated and we have connected the patient to mechanical ventilator. Next is the management of patient in a mechanical ventilation, that we will be doing. Then we have to do suctioning. Open suction is not allowed. Closed suction facilities are there. So closed suction is preferred in order to avoid aerosol generation. So that is very important. Then sedation must be given in order to prevent respiratory overdrive. That is also very, very important. Then another important thing is we must position the patient for prone position for few hours. That is, we know that in a bedridden patient or in an ICU patient, we used to change the position 2 hourly. So here also we can do 2 hourly position change. That is, patient can be put on supine position for 2 hours, then left lateral for another 2 hours, then prone position for another 2 hours. Then next 2 hours patient will be positioned in the right lateral position. Like that, the patient position must be changed, which will be help for the postural drainage. So like that, in a 24 hours, the patient must be kept in prone position for 16 hours. In total, 16 hours per 24 hours, patient must be positioned in prone position. So that is also not an easy job, but the prone position has very many advantages. That is, prone position will help to open the alveoli properly. It will help in the distribution of oxygen in the blood properly, and it will also is good for the ventilation, perfusion, and these are the advantages of prone position. It will open the closed alveoli. So these are the different advantages of prone position. So that is another mode of management. Then next is ECMO. That is not available in our setup. That is extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. That is another technique. Then another type of breathing technique which can be encouraged is the active cycle of breathing technique. That we can practice active cycle of breathing technique. That is it's a type of breathing exercise in which it will help the lungs to relax and to clear the mucus. That is active cycle of breathing technique. So this is about the management of refractory hypoxemia and respiratory failure. Next I am going to explain about the septic shock, sepsis and septic shock. So you all know that sepsis and septic shock means the patient will be having high fever, and there will be BP will be very low. So we can say that the mean arterial pressure may be less than 65 mm of Hg, like that. Serum lactate level will be more, that is more than 2 millimole, that is per liter. That is the serum lactate level. So these all indicate that there will be hypotension, tachycardia, etc. will be there. So these all indicate that the patient is going into septic shock. So the next is the management of septic shock. And in the management of septic shock also, what we can do is we will be managing with the fluid administration. Fluid administration, we must do it very carefully. We must avoid fluid overload, and we must monitor the patient to prevent pulmonary edema and all. This fluid administration must be done like this. That is 30 ml per kilogram body weight. That must be the fluid amount of fluid that must be given for the first 3 hours. After that, what we can do is we can continue with the 250 ml to 1000 ml. Like that, we can continue the fluid. So during this time, additional boluses of 250 ml to 1000 ml can be given. So after the 3 hours. So that is a fluid management. Along with this, we must monitor the BP, CVP and all. That is very, very important. Then antibiotics. We know that in the case of septic shock, we will be going with the highly potent antibiotic like vancomycin, meropenem, piptas, etc. So that is the antibiotic. Then we will be managing the hypertension with the vasopressors like noradrenaline, dopamine, dobutamine, etc. So that is the management of septic shock. Our target must be to achieve a mean arterial pressure more than 65 millimeters of mercury. So that is about the management of septic shock. Next is the management of complications. Management of complications, I have already told that is there are different types of complications. That is lung related complications. Lung related complications include this atelectasis, ARDS, pulmonary embolism, etc. So the patients I have in the pathophysiology, I have already explained that the alveoli are damaged, so there is increased chance of rupture of the alveoli. So we should not use increased pressure. That is why we are going with the low tidal volume. So low tidal volume is to prevent the rupture of the damaged alveoli. So that is one thing. Then these are the different complications in the pulmonary system. Then complications in the thromboembolism complications, that is initially the patient will develop thrombosis. I have already told that there will be increase in the procoagulants and a decrease in the anticoagulants because of the action of the inflammatory mediators. That will result in formation of thrombosis, and that will result in DIC later because of the exhaustion of the coagulation factors. So for that, in order to prevent that, we used to give enoxaparin 1 mg per kg subcutaneously. We used to give. That is the management of prevention of thromboembolism complication. Then multi-organ dysfunction. Multi-organ dysfunction like acute kidney injury characterized by decreased urine output, acute liver injury characterized by metabolic derangement, and acute cardiac injury characterized by elevated troponin level and chest pain and features of ACS. And sometimes there may be features of CVA because of the thromboembolism in the cerebral blood vessels. So these are the different complications. So the complications are, many complications are there. We know that in one patient all these complications will not develop together. It will vary depend upon the type of patients. So what we have to do is based on the type of complication, the complication must be managed and controlled. That is very, very important. Then another thing which I want to tell is I have already told that when the patient comes to the casualty, we must identify whether this patient is a high risk patient or normal patient. Because high risk patients include, there are three types of classification. That is, if there is some diseases like chronic diseases like uncontrolled diabetes, hypertension, cardiac disease, CLD, CKD, etc. The patient is considered as high risk patient. If the patient is old age or above 65 years, then the person is considered as high risk patient. And then if the vital signs are deranged, then also the patient is considered as a high risk patient. That is, if the temperature is very high, that is 101. If the pulse is very high, that is more than 124 per minute. If the respiration is very high, that is more than 30 per minute. If the patient is having hypertension or hypertension, then we can consider that patient as a high risk patient. And SpO2 is very low, then also that is means below 94, then we consider the patient as a high risk patient. Then if the blood results are available, then also we can identify whether this patient is high risk patient. That is, for example, increased level of D-dimer, increased level of troponin, increased level of LDH, increased level of CPK, increased level of CRP, C-reactive protein, this decreased level of absolute lymphocyte count, and the presence of multi-organ dysfunction, that is elevated level of RFT, LFT, etc. All this denote that this patient belongs to a high risk category. So such patient will rapidly deteriorate into critical severe condition, and that there is, if we are not managing such patients properly, it can result in even in death if it is not identified properly and if it is not managed properly. Next, I am going to explain about the action of different drugs which we have already discussed, that is chloroquine and hydrochloroquine. Hydrochloroquine is more potent than chloroquine. So we know that both these drugs were used in case of malaria, and now it is found that it is somewhat effective in COVID-19 also. And before that, I would like to say that there is no single magic bullet to treat COVID-19. There is no drug of choice to treat the COVID-19. So all these drugs are given just to control the symptoms or just to manage some stages of the disease. It is not a final answer for COVID-19 treatment. So first one is chloroquine or hydrochloroquine. The action is it will stop the entry of the virus into the alveolar cell. That is the action of the chloroquine or hydrochloroquine. This chloroquine dosage is 600 mg BD on the first day, followed by 300 mg BD for the next 5 days. Then the dosage of hydrochloroquine, it is 400 mg BD for the first day, and followed by 200 mg BD for the next days. Then remdesivir, I told in the case of moderate cases we used to give remdesivir. The action of the remdesivir is it will block the enzyme, that is RNA dependent RNA polymerase. It is an enzyme which is important for the replication of RNA, formation of new RNA, viral RNA. So it will block the action of this enzyme. So remdesivir dosage is 200 mg initially, followed by 100 mg for the next 3 days. Then ritonavir, another drug. Ritonavir is a protease inhibitor. That is protease inhibitor. Protease, I told in the pathophysiology, protease is an enzyme which helps to production of surface proteins of the virus. So ritonavir is a drug which inhibits the protease. So the dosage is 100 mg BD into 4 days. Then another drug I told in the case of severe COVID-19, that is tocilizumab. Tocilizumab means this is a drug which can block the interleukin and it can prevent the cytokine storm. So dosage is 8 mg per kilogram body weight for 6 minutes. That is the dosage of tocilizumab. Then azithromycin can be given. So that is azithromycin 500 mg OD. Then for the next days 250 mg for 4 days. So one thing I want to mention is, along with the COVID-19, other infections also can coexist in this patient. That is, sometimes the patient may be having another viral infection like leptospirosis or dengue fever. Sometimes this patient may be having another bacterial infection. So other infections also can coexist with this infection. So we must identify, we must roll out, we must do other investigations to find out and identify other types of infections. For example, serum procalcitonin will be elevated if the patient is having a secondary infection or other infection. So then, based on the culture finding, blood culture finding, sensitivity finding and all, we must be starting treatment for that infection. Then that is about azithromycin. Next is steroids. Steroids I have already told that methylprednisolone can be given 1 mg per kg for the moderate cases and 2 mg per kg for the severe cases. And this Dexona 0.2 to 0.4 mg can be given for the severe cases, either methylprednisolone or Dexona. So that is about the steroid therapy. Then plasma therapy, we have seen that those who have recovered from the COVID-19, their plasma will be taken and it can be administered to new patients. That is another management. Then vitamin C administration, that is vitamin C 500 mg 6 hourly can be given. That is for the boosting of the immune system. Then zinc can be administered. Then melatonin can be administered. Then vitamin D3 can be administered. So these are vitamin C, zinc, melatonin, and vitamin D3, etc. are just to improve our immunity. It has got an anti-fibrotic action, it has got an anti-inflammatory action, it has got antioxidant action. So these drugs are not the drug of choice for COVID-19. This will just improve the immunity, that's all. Then next thing is the management of complication. The drug for management of complication must be administered. That is, in case of cardiac disease, cardiac drugs must be administered, and in the case of liver disease, liver drugs must be administered. In the case of sepsis, highly potent antibiotic must be administered. So that is all about the pharmacological management. I hope it is clear. In this, I have explained only about the medical management. We have not included the nursing management or psychological management and all. Purely the medical management we have discussed here. I hope it is clear. Thank you.